When U.S. President Joe Biden officially announced his campaign for re-election last month, it set the stage for a rematch between him and former President Donald Trump in the 2024 race for the White House. Now, Biden is unlikely to face any serious opposition for the Democratic nomination, but in the Republican primaries, there could be a wild card for Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Although he is not officially declared, DeSantis certainly looked like a candidate last week on a visit to Israel, in which he touted his strong support for the Jewish state. A Trump-DeSantis contest for the GOP presidential nomination could present a dilemma for conservative Republican Jewish voters. And while the Jewish vote numerically may not be a major factor in the primaries, Jewish support certainly could. For example, just take a look at this photo from DeSantis' Jerusalem visit, where he is seated between two major Jewish donors, Colorado businessman Larry Mizell, who was a Trump campaign financier in 2016, and Miriam Adelson, widow of the billionaire Sheldon Adelson, who was one of the GOP's biggest contributors. So this week in our Jewish Forum discussion, we ask, is a Ron DeSantis run for the White House in this campaign good for the Jews? And with us, we have on Jewish Forum this week our senior correspondent Owen Alterman in our Tel Aviv studio. We have Brian Leib, former executive director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty, joining us from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And Yigal Marcus, director of Republican Overseas Israel. He's in the Israeli town of Modi'in. Yigal, I'm going to start with you. Ron DeSantis, would he be a welcome, a good addition in this race for the Republican nomination and presidency in 2024?
Absolutely. Ron DeSantis' support for Israel and the Jewish community goes way, way back, long before he was running for president, unofficially, and certainly governor. But his connection to the Jewish community goes way back. His connections to Chabad also go way, way back. So this is a person who's a longtime true friend, way before it became politically expedient and beneficial for him to be pro-Israel, or certainly to be supportive of the Jewish community. So I think he's a great candidate. Obviously, Florida's got a lot of Jews. I think he's a very popular governor down there, and I would expect the Jewish community to come out in droves for him.
Well, one of the Jews down in Florida is Brian Leib, but Brian has a slightly different take. In fact, Brian, you tweeted recently, Ron, please focus on being the chief executive and leader. We elected you to be in Florida. You have no chance at all in the primary against Donald Trump. End the madness, please. Why do you think that, Brian? Why do you think Ron DeSantis wouldn't even have a chance against Donald Trump and perhaps including for the Jewish vote?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the program. And let me say to the Israelis that are watching, listening right now, I think the one thing that the three of us can agree on is that as 100+ rockets now have rained down on southern Israel, the Jewish people here in America and around the world, we stand with the people and land of Israel. Terrorists will not win. And I'm Israel high today, tomorrow, and forever. Now, let me focus on my tweet. Now, when you look at polling numbers and endorsements, which, by the way, matter very much, you have President Trump sitting at around 52% and Ron DeSantis at around 22%. That's the average of all the polls that are happening right now. So, yeah, my tweet stands, I think, on facts and on statistics. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, I don't think Ron DeSantis has any path to winning the primary as long as Donald Trump is in the race. And by the way, I think Ron DeSantis is a fantastic governor. I voted for him. I donated to him. I supported him to be my governor, and over the last 2 months, he's been spending more time in states across the country and overseas on his book tour than he is in being the governor that me and so many Floridians voted for him to be. So that's why my tweet, that's why I put that tweet out. And I think that at the end of the day, Donald Trump has the record of not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk, sitting in the Oval Office. That's something that Ron DeSantis does not have.
Right. Owen, clearly, listening to our two guests, both Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis are attractive candidates for certainly Republican Jews. So this could be as somewhat of a dilemma going into primaries for those who are going to decide who are they going to support at the primary ballot box, but also financially, which is a big factor.
Yeah, absolutely, Kalev. Obviously, you're right. Democrats aren't going to be interested in either of these guys, and no one would expect that they would be. Donald Trump, because, of course, he's Donald Trump, and Ron DeSantis, because even there, Democrats are not going to agree with his policies and with his worldview, and will instead look to Joe Biden and the rest of the Democratic field in the various offices. I actually covered Ron DeSantis' visit here last week, Kalev, and was at the Museum of Tolerance for the event, for the speech, and then at the presser. It was a great performance, I think, from DeSantis' perspective. I thought the speech was very well crafted, did, I think, as best a job as I've ever heard an American politician do, and speak to both Jews and their love and connection for Israel, and also evangelicals and their love and connection for Israel. Maybe that comes with good speech writing, and maybe it comes with the experience of being governor of Florida, where, of course, you have constituents in significant numbers from both groups. And also at the presser, again, we saw a bit of an outburst of anger from the governor, but overall, I think a good performance. Also, Kalevi decided, for whatever reason, not to go out and attack Joe Biden. Some speculating it might be because of ethics reasons, because he was here on state business. But be that as it may, I think also a smart decision for Ron DeSantis, because he didn't start a frontal attack on Biden, let alone Trump, and instead focused more on his own positives, although on the edges, there was obviously criticism. Look, as for Jewish Republicans, at the end of the day, Ron DeSantis is an alternative to Trump. Those who like Trump will vote for Trump. I don't think Ron DeSantis is a poor man's Trump. Or if he is a poor man's Trump, he's a poor man's Trump, right? If you like Donald Trump and you like his leadership style and you like what he did as president, you're going to be voting for him. I think Republicans, Jewish or not, who are looking for an alternative have started to coalesce around Ron DeSantis. I think obviously our guest is right. Is that going to be enough to actually get across the finish line of a primary? We don't yet know. But it's also true that candidates like Nikki Haley, for example, who could be very attractive to Jewish donors and Jewish voters for obvious reasons, are going to have to show more strength in the next 4 or 5 months to be able to be seen as serious contenders. For now, it's Ron DeSantis who's the alternative to Trump. And if you don't like Trump, then Ron DeSantis is going to be the candidate that you coalesce around. Just one final note, Kalev. In the sidelines of that event, I interviewed Sylvan Adams, the Canadian-Israeli billionaire, who essentially said that Donald Trump is simply too unpredictable, that for all of his solid policies toward Israel, as Sylvan Adams, as many see them, he's too much of a wild card. Ron DeSantis is someone who's more predictable and more consistent, and for that reason, more worthy of support.
Well, you mentioned Ron DeSantis focusing on his positives. He actually even made a kind of interesting claim in his appearance there in Jerusalem. Let's take a listen to that.
When we were trying to cajole the previous administration to do it, I actually launched a very small delegation over here. We looked at a bunch of different sites. We did a big press conference, announced that this was going to happen. We were confident, and there was all a plethora of possibilities to be able to do it. I chaired a major congressional hearing in the fall of 2017 leading up to the decision.
Brian, we may want to comment on that. The governor's saying he had to cajole the Trump administration to make that decision, but also respond to some of the comments maybe of Owen, that there are some Republicans and Jewish Republicans who might think DeSantis is just a better bet, for example, going up against Joe Biden in the general election.
Well, I think Ron DeSantis' comments about having to cajole the former President Donald Trump to move the embassy to Jerusalem are really short-sighted. I mean, certainly, I'm sure then Congressman Ron DeSantis and many other congressmen and congresswomen were offering their support to the former president to make that historic and bold decision. But at the end of the day, there was only one individual that was sitting in the Oval Office taking the incoming fire from everyone around the world that was telling him not to do it. And President Trump was the one that pulled the trigger and made that happen. So I'm not really sure why Ron DeSantis is trying to take a victory lap on this. Again, I'm sure he was supportive of it. I'm sure he did make phone calls. I'm sure he did a lot of things to help support this. And I think we're all very grateful and appreciative of that. But at the end of the day, there was one individual that had to take that incoming fire and make that bold and historic decision. And that was the former President Donald J. Trump. Now, let me shift to the second part of your question. I mean, certainly when you look at the primary numbers right now, Donald Trump is in the overwhelming lead, over 30% on average from almost every single poll out there. And also, I think when you start to look at the general election and there's numbers coming out from independents, And Democrats, while Trump is not, enjoying a massive lead over Biden. He is in a lot of those polls neck and neck with President Joe Biden, with independents and with undecided. So, and I think that's only going to continue to increase. Donald Trump's support will only continue to increase, because at the end of the day, when you put Donald Trump's strength up against Joe Biden's weakness, I think the American people are going to have a very easy decision to make, and that's going to be to put Donald Trump back in the White House for 4 more years.
All right, so I want to go back to Yigal. And Brian's point is, why shouldn't the governor just sit this one out? Jews have, certainly conservative Republican Jews have an option in Donald Trump, including those like you who vote from Israel. So what would be benefit from a perhaps nasty primary campaign?
I think there are 2 points to make. The first, actually 2 names, Kanye West and Nick Fuentes. People may have short memories, but Kanye West was ranked the #1 anti-Semite last year in America, and apparently he gets free lunch from Donald Trump, or was it dinner? I don't remember. Maybe it was both. But that's something that Jews are going to remember. I don't know that other politicians of his stature should be, or have met or should be meeting with notoriously dangerous and terrible anti-Semites. That's number one. Number two, I think it's an important question to ask: why doesn't Donald Trump have 90% of the Republican vote in the current polls? Why is he only at around 50%? As recently as a few weeks ago, he was at 44%. And the answer is because there are many, many Republicans out there who want to change. They want something different. They don't want the unpredictable, nature of the former president. From a policy perspective, I loved him. They loved him and for what he accomplished. But do we really need his baggage? And so the way that I look at it is, it's going to be a very interesting primary season. Yeah, he may be around 50%, but that means that there's 50% of the people out there who are uncomfortable with him. And when hopefully early on in the primary season, the number of candidates is cleared, and it really comes down to 1, 2, probably one other candidate, and no longer will plurality of the vote count, but rather majority. I think it's going to be a lot closer. And I think that having an executive like a DeSantis or like a Nikki Haley, who have significant experience in the executive, as well as in foreign policy and congressional, I think I think it's going to be a very interesting campaign and a very interesting primary season. So right. Jews have long histories. We have long memories. Nick Fuentes and Kanye West, and the pictures of them, being together, and the stories of them having lunch, and that doesn't bode well for him.
All right.
Yeah, and Donald Trump, if I could jump in, I mean, he did come in and say that he was meeting with Kanye West to try and help him on his troubled path. He said he had no knowledge whatsoever of Nick Fuentes being in that dinner. And I'm sorry, I respectfully disagree with you. I don't think that he knew he was going to be there. In all of my private conversations with the former president, he has done nothing but show love and support for the Jewish people, for Israel. And you're right, Jews do have long memories. And it was in 1985 when the right. Jewish National Fund recognized Donald Trump for being such a strong supporter of Zionism. Okay,
gentlemen,
so, Trump has a very solid record on this issue.
We'll have to leave it at that. Owen Alterman, Yigal Marcus, and Brian Leib, thank you for joining us.